Welcome to our Zoom lessons on the story of Jesus. My name is Jamie Knapp, and in this lesson, which is the final lesson in our study, we will focus on the resurrection. Let's share the screen and go to the PowerPoint slides. Jesus died late in the day on Friday, and Joseph of Arimathea, as well as Nicodemus, then took his body to a tomb that was owned by Joseph, and they prepared the body of Jesus for burial. Well, Sabbath began at sundown on Friday and continued through sundown on Saturday. And of course, by then it would have been dark. And so it wasn't until Sunday morning, about a day and a half later, that the women that Matthew and Mark tell us about who went to the tomb of Jesus could actually go. Now, if we look at the accounts surrounding the resurrection provided in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark, they're actually very similar to one another. In Matthew chapter 28, Matthew identifies two women who went to the tomb of Jesus, Mary Magdalene and, quote, the other Mary. Mark identifies three women in his gospel, chapter 16, verse 1, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, as well as Salome. Well, one of the things that concerned the women was how were they going to move the stone that had been rolled in front of the tomb? You might recall from the previous lesson, it was a very large stone, and there was a trench in front of the tomb. And the stone would have to be rolled up an incline and then a stopping stone placed in it to keep it from rolling back in front of the opening to the tomb. And so that was their concern. How would they, either two women or three women, depending on which of the two gospels you read, how would they be able to move the stone? Well, when they got there, problem solved. An angel had already taken care of that. And the angel instructed the women to tell the disciples of Jesus that he had risen and that they needed to go to Galilee because that's where he was going to go. Both Matthew and Mark have what we call the Great Commission, and then Matthew 28, 18 through 20, Mark 16, 15 through 16. But only Mark includes information about the ascension of Jesus, the return of Jesus to heaven. If we look at Luke, we actually can see more details than Matthew or Mark provided for us. Luke tells us that women went to the tomb of Jesus, but he indicates that it was a larger group. Chapter 24, verse 10. He identifies Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Joanna. And then he simply says, and the other women who were with them. Luke also provides details about the trip to Emmaus, or the walk to Emmaus. This is where two individuals who were leaving Jerusalem and walking toward Emmaus. Emmaus was a village about 7 miles away from Jerusalem. And they were talking about all that had just happened, and the crucifixion, the death of Jesus, and the disappointment surrounding that. And then Jesus appeared. They did not recognize him, but he appeared on the same road, and he traveled with them and listened to what they were saying, joined in the conversation. And by the time they got to Emmaus, it was late in the day, and so they invited Jesus to stay with them, and he agreed to do so. And when they sat down to eat, Jesus broke some bread, and at that point, the two individuals recognized who Jesus was. And then Luke tells us Jesus vanished. Mark mentions this, chapter 16, verse 12, but it's just very, very, very brief passing. But it's the same story that Luke provides details for us. Luke reports that Jesus appeared to the 10 apostles in Jerusalem. In chapter 24, verses 36 through 43, he showed them his hands, he showed them his feet, and very importantly, he asked them for something to eat. The idea being that he wanted them to see that this was not just a ghost they were seeing, that they were seeing him. And he was showing them the wounds from his crucifixion, and he wanted to show them that He was a real person who could eat just like they could. Luke includes information about the Great Commission, and Luke also includes information about the ascension of Jesus. His account indicates that it happened near Bethany, which again was just a few miles outside of Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting about Luke's account is because Luke continued his two-volume account of the life of Jesus and then the beginning of Christianity, the church established following the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. If we turn to Acts chapter 1, in the first 12 verses, we actually are provided with some more details about what happened in that time after Jesus was raised from the dead, but before he returned to heaven. We're told that Jesus appeared to his followers over a span of 40 days. He told his followers, particularly the apostles, to go to Jerusalem, stay in Jerusalem, and that they were going to receive the Holy Spirit. And then we're also told in Acts chapter 1 that the ascension of Jesus, his return to heaven, occurred near the Mount of Olives, which again was just outside of Jerusalem. John includes 2 chapters about the resurrection. John tells us that Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, but John also tells us that Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene. Like Luke, John reports that Jesus appeared to the 10 apostles in Jerusalem. He showed them his hands, and in John's account, he also showed them his side, where the soldier had stuck his spear to confirm Jesus' death on the cross. But Thomas was not there. And later he was told the Lord came to see us in chapter 20 of John, verse 25. Thomas wasn't so sure. He wanted to see it for himself. And because of that, he has been given the label of doubting Thomas. Well, 8 days later, Jesus appeared again to the apostles. And this time Thomas was there. He was able to see Jesus, talk to Jesus, and place his hands in the wounds that Jesus bore because of the crucifixion. John also tells us in chapter 21 that Jesus provided breakfast for his followers or for his apostles at the Sea of Galilee. Now in John, it's called the Sea of Tiberias, but in a previous lesson, we had noted that it was the same body of water, Sea of Galilee, Sea of Tiberias. Jesus is on the beach. He calls out to Peter and the others who are fishing, "Have you caught any fish?" They said, "No, we don't have anything." And he says, "Well, why don't you cast your nets on the other side of the boat?" And once they did that, they hauled in a very large number of fish. It was also during this time that Jesus asked Peter 3 different times, "Peter, do you love me?" And this goes back to Peter's denial of Jesus 3 times the night before Jesus' crucifixion. And so there's great symmetry between Peter having denied Jesus 3 times and now Peter confirming his love for Jesus 3 times. Well, that brings our study to a close. This is the final lesson. I hope the information has been helpful to you, and I hope that you've been able to see how the Gospels can be interwoven in order to have a more complete picture of the life and the activities and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. I do thank you for watching the Zoom lessons.